to the cause. The link is in the description below. We're going to get our teeth into a really good performance for Celtic. Dundee United 0, Celtic 3 in Tannadice. Tom Rogic with a brilliant opener. David Turnbull doubled the lead just before halftime. And then Liam Scales, anybody who follows the show will know that I've been banging on about Liam Scales for the last couple of weeks. He got his goal on his SPFL debut for Celtic. Gentlemen, welcome along. How are you?
Hello. Very good. Very good. Very happy to be here.
So as we get into this performance, I mean, it's a busy week. We went from Aberdeen into the Hearts game, and now we had Tannadice, Dundee United away. 3 difficult enough games, 3 pretty decent performances, but this was the best performance out of all 3 of them, and probably one of Celtic's best performances of the year. Alan?
Yeah, I think so. One of the topics that we cover, and please do join us on Huddle Breakdown if you like this sort of thing, is kind of the debate about sort of structure versus personnel. Now, obviously, both are kind of important, but this was a great example of Postecoglou, again, putting his imprint on how he wants the team to play, and the fact that the personnel were disrupted, and you might say taking out what has been an absolutely fantastic player in Jota, the goals, the assists, his ability to take the team up the pitch has been fantastic since he joined. You know, I think our hearts all sank when he limped off the other game. Ralston, who thought at the beginning of the season we'd all have our heads in our hands when poor old Tony Ralston limped off. It was just incredible. But it shows again the alchemy that Postecoglou has applied to many players, actually. And you can go through the squad and tell a similar story. So we arrived at this game, again, with personnel issues. But what really impressed me, certainly for, I'm going to say 60 to 65 minutes, was the structure and organisation of the team. If you watch the highlights, when we defended, everybody came back at the same time. And when we went forward, everybody went forward at the same time. That level of orchestration and structure, spacing, is the best I've seen so far this season. And I know Dundee United really struggled to get the ball anywhere into the opposition final third, clearly limited in that regard. But nevertheless, those are the things I'm looking for that sort of suggest, have we got a coherent setup? Can you take Jota out and slip in Mikey Johnson and really just carry on in terms of the way that you're playing? So that one aspect was really pleasing for me. And then, of course, individual brilliance, which is what Celtic should expect, but given its wage bill disparity, then comes into play and opens the game up with absolutely a couple of stunning goals. So, yeah, brilliance and structure, nice combination.
Exactly. I'll just bring you through some of the things that went on during the game, because this is an unusual situation for us where we're actually analysing the game about an hour out from the full time. We usually have about a week to do our notes on this, but we're going off FOTMOB data for this week. But there was a couple of changes to the Celtic lineup. As we know, there was a load of injuries going into this game. Greg Taylor came back into the team at left back. Juranovic went out to the right back. Mikey Johnson came in for Jota on the left. James Forrest started on the right. Other than that, it was pretty much the same as it's always been. The stats for this game, shots 6 versus 26. The XG was 0.28 versus 4.08. XG from open play for Celtic was 3.19. So about the same as we've scored. The chances created 6 versus 26 again. And then the accurate passes 198 versus 659. So this was an incredibly dominant performance from Celtic, James.
It was, and I think one of the things that we've been talking on the Huddle Breakdown is really since the close of the transfer window, we've kind of had a pretty consistent reduction in chance creation from open play. And I think this is the first time that we can really say, wow, kind of echoes from some of the early season performances against Dundee and against St. Mirren. So the other thing I found most encouraging, I largely echo what Alan said, meaning that the structure of the side being able to have interchangeable parts. I mean, that's the impact of Ange and his brilliance. But I think the other part was some of the chance creation from McGregor, to me, was probably the most optimistic I've been in a while. I mean, he can get a little bit conservative with his passing. And the fact that he was able to really carve them open from deep and some of those balls over the top, that's a part of kind of quote unquote Ange ball that some of us that have looked at what he did in Japan and even proceeding and talking to people that have followed him a lot longer, that's a piece of the puzzle that kind of been waiting for to see more. And I thought that was, one of the most optimistic things that come out of the game is just carving them open with vertical passes. Last thing I'll say, and just kind of the intro here, is naive might be too strong of a word, but I don't think we're going to face a Dundee United type of game plan all that often, particularly with what we're going to start doing to teams if they try that. So, kind of that mid block, they didn't really drop that deep. They weren't really narrow. There's plenty of space in between the lines. I mean, that's part of why Rogic was going rampant, was there was a lot of space for him to be operating in there. So, and that the first game against them at Celtic Park, I think, was one where we also ripped them apart. We didn't finish as well. And I mean, the XG in that game was also not this distorted, but even though it was a 1-1, they just happened to score on a good goal by Harks that game. Whereas today, they didn't quite finish one of those opportunities, but that was a tilted game as well. So I don't think there's going to be too many teams that are trying to come at us in a more open way like Dundee United. And there's a lot of debate as to whether they should try to play that way or not. That's a philosophical thing, but so I want to see us be able to do this against a more packed in, narrow team as well. But hugely encouraging.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the more individual performances in just a sec. There's a couple of comments coming in on the YouTube stream, and if you are watching on YouTube, do drop us a comment. We'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of the show. Paddy Ryan says that it's the best, brilliant display today, the best under Ange. Hopefully more to come. Kookaburra is saying a thoroughly professional performance from the team. And then Stevie Boy says, we knew our differences today. That's what a good manager fixes. So loads of comments coming in. Keep them coming in. We'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of the show. So let's talk about the performances and the individual players. I want to start with the forward line. Mikey Johnson, James Forrest, and Kyogo starting up front. Mikey Johnson, for me, had a weak enough game. Again, we're seeing, he's getting on the ball, but when he gets on the ball, what can he do with it? Not much. His end product wasn't great, but I think we saw a lot more fluidity in the stretching of the Dundee United defense than we have seen when teams are sitting back. I know Dundee weren't exactly playing, 10 men behind the ball, but the way that they were able to get in behind the defense today opened up a lot more options for the midfield to pick out those passes on.
Yeah, I think the movement was very good in general. So again, it was more the structure and the team play that I was impressed with in that regard. We were very successful in getting the fullbacks close to the winger, getting the midfielder drawn across, and then creating those overloads in wide areas, and therefore that opened up the play. That happened multiple times in the first half, and that's again, I think, what the manager is looking to try and do, and it largely came good in terms of individual contributions. Yeah, I think Johnston, I mean, he ended up with, I think, just over 0.5 his scoring contribution in terms of potential goals and assists. But again, he got into a lot of good areas. But then did he really deliver the final pass? Did he? And he didn't take that many shots. So yeah, I think when we look back, we'll probably again see it as a bit of a mixed performance in that regard. But I think what he did do well was he got himself into good positions. He pre-stretched the Dundee United defence, and he created space for others in that way. So I think it was a good team performance from Johnson as opposed to a stellar individual performance. I think on Forrest on the other side, I mean, all the way through the first half, I was a little bit thinking he's not really quite there yet. This isn't James Forrest as we know him. He's been out for a long time. He's 30 years old now. Will he still be that dynamic, explosive winger? Didn't see many signs of that. James is a good link player again. He's an underrated part of his game is that he generally makes quite good conservative, possibly, decisions in the final third. And I think he was, to use the old phrase, playing well within himself today. And then, obviously, if he's feeling a hamstring injury, then they were right to take him off. So I would say that given those two individual performances in the wide areas, it was still remarkable that as a team, we were so fluid. Some of that was compensated by the absolute mental movement of Kyogo, just all over the place, pulling Dundee United here, there, and everywhere. And Turnbull and Rogic absolutely made fun of the space that he created for them.
Yeah, and a couple of offsides that weren't offside. So I'm sure we'll see Crawford Allen on national radio now tomorrow to make sure that those are corrected and highlighted as wrong decisions.
I'm not going to ask James because he always has the right answer to his fingertips, but so I'll ask you, how many offsides do you think Celtic get on average this season? Number of times caught offside per game?
I'd say 6.
1.75. So Celtic were caught offside 7 times today. And I saw replays of 4 of those, and 3 of them were incorrect. And 2 of them looked very dodgy. And you sort of think, why? That's quite a startling outlier, isn't it, really? I'm sure there's no coincidence that the head of refereeing suddenly made an appearance during the week, which is a very rare occurrence. Mr. Madden was given a dressing down on stopping the play for Jota pulling his hamstring, which he might have heard the twang as he ran past the referee, and also for obviously for the Kyogo goal that I don't think anyone's seen any replays of recently. So remarkable offside performance from the officials today.
Yeah, it was absolute nonsense, and I mean how Butcher was not sent off for that tackle in the second half. Yeah. I'll never know. I will never know how that was not a red card. But we'll move on from that. James, your general thoughts on the forward play today? What do we do about Mikey Johnson? Is he just destined to be a good squad player within this team, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that both he and Turnbull, I think today their performances were a good example of narratives and how they can really create a confirmation bias situation. I mean, you kind of get. I think the general, and this is anecdotal, but I think a lot of people have been down on those 2 players, and there's been for some good reason there. Turnbull's gotten a little bit inconsistent in the last couple of months, but he's also been run into the ground. I mean, the poor guy has been flogged with minutes. We see a lot of our players breaking down with soft tissue injuries, and he's been able to sustain and pretty much play every game. And increasingly, I mean, we talked about this last season, how much he was a 70-minute player coming off of that long-term injury with Motherwell. And I mean, this season he's just been, immense from a minutes perspective. And Mikey Johnson's just not played much. He's been out so much. He's even though he's not all that young anymore, he just doesn't have that much game time in the first team because he's been broken up so much with injuries and, being out of the side. So I thought he was fine, especially in the first half. I think the team, again, I mean, if I was going to have one red flag coming out of the game, and it's a small one given how good the performance was, is that on a relative basis, we did start to kind of weaken in that 50 to 65 minute window again. And the game opened up and the midfield opened up and Dundee United playing open, they started to get a little bit of traction in the game at that point. And I think you saw that with Johnson. I thought Johnson was actually really good in the first half. He had some good crosses, cutbacks. I think, he probably got tired, like it looked like a lot of the team did. He hasn't played that much. And then he started to make some mistakes and, give the ball away a little bit. And that drops in the old confirmation bias because people have been kind of down on him. I thought on balance, he was actually pretty good today, particularly, in the first 55, 60 minutes. I thought Turnbull was terrific today. I mean, Rogic stands out obviously because he was playing like a maniac in a good way, winning all of those duels and tackles in the middle. But I mean, Turnbull was all over the place on the ball. His corners were good, even though we haven't been able to execute on those recently. So as far as the front 3, I thought Johnson was fine. Kyogo was, Kyogo, brilliant. And I agree with Forrest. I mean, that's going to be an issue, I think, on the right side as far as rotating. And, he does look like he's lost a step or two, and that's normal with his age. But overall, like I said, this is the most important thing, is that the system's working now. It looks coherent, and the way the ball's moving with McGregor back where I've been arguing should be. You can have guys with kind of okay games and still light another team up because of how strong the system is and players playing where they should be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult one with the amount of games it's on. I think you will see injuries. You will see people tiring, regardless of how fit or otherwise they are. I mean, it's just the way things work with the fixture build up in Scotland. On David Turnbull, so again, we're working off FOTMOB data here because James and Alan, your data isn't available just yet. But on David Turnbull, he had one goal today, obviously before halftime, a really nice goal as well, has to be said. Expected goals 1.56, expected assists 0.82, 89% passing accuracy, and 72 accurate passes. So in terms of the midfield, I wouldn't say his job today was control. His job was very much attacking, and you've seen him taking a good few shots in the second half as well. But Cal McGregor was the key man for Celtic in the midfield today, playing in that deeper role a little bit more as a traditional number 6 with the controlling the pace of the game. Alan, I thought this was one of Cal McGregor's top performances this season. I mean, again, a player who has played an extortionate amount of minutes, but just continues to play at such a high level. And I mean, not to say he's grown into the Celtic role, because I think he's always been captain material, but since he's been made captain, I think he's gone up another level.
Yeah, and I don't know if his performance levels, because I think he's had a few little dips in the season as well. And when he moved to 8, he did seem to kind of, that took him 2 or 3 games to get used to that position. And his productivity did dip quite a bit. That's the kind of negative side of it. On the positive side, I agree with you in terms of the way that he has responded to being the captain of Celtic and taking that mantle on. The way that he conducts himself, the way that he speaks, the responsibility that he feels, the accountability that he feels, and seems to embrace and take seriously in the way that he talks to his teammates, talks to the press, etc. I think is a really impressive young man. And that's been a revelation to me, because I'd have had McGregor down as being a bit of a quiet individual, but he's really stood up to that pressure and that spotlight of being the Celtic captain. My immediate thought when he put that wonderful ball through for Turnbull was, could see that happening a few more times, Callum. You can do that. You can do that. I would like to see a little bit more of that. But I think it comes back to maybe what James said earlier, which is more verticality in Celtic's passing has been evident in the last few games. And we noticed it against Hearts quite a lot. In that first 10 minutes, Hearts went 4-4-2. The manager talked about being quite bold. So Celtic tried to pick them off with long balls over the top. No harm in that. These were very targeted passes. And when you've got pace up front, it absolutely makes sense to do that. And I think that is becoming an increasing feature. And if McGregor can add that to his game, then I think that's only a good thing. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember. I tried to work out in the replay how many players he packed to put that ball through to Turnbull. It might have been 9 players he took out with that one pass. I think it all got a bit confused because of what happened with Turnbull and the flick over and so forth. But I'll have to look it back. But yeah, wonderful control. Wonderful awareness again, because when he gets the ball, you can see his head movement. His head is always moving. He's always scanning. He's always knows what he's going to do with the ball when he gets it, and that's a great high-end skill. And and maybe actually that 6th position is his best position. I think that's a good debate.
As I said, Celtic had 659 accurate passes today. 98 of those were from Cal McGregor, so almost 7% of all of Celtic's passes came from Cal McGregor in midfield. James, on the positioning of Cal McGregor and the deeper role he played today, how much of that is reliant on Tom Rogic and Turnbull having a good game in order for Cal McGregor actually to do his job to the full extent?
Yeah, I think some of it relates to those 2 players. Also, it depends on the tactics of the opposing team, meaning that, for example, Hearts seemed to really look to mark him out of the game and kind of take him out in build-up play, whereas I think Dundee were less kind of man-to-man in that regard, so that freed him up a little bit. And it's a pick-your-poison kind of situation. I mean, I'm not sure there's a right or wrong. It's deciding what kind of vulnerability you want to have. I really do think him taking more risk with his passing from deep is going to be of tremendous importance. And he's got the ability to do it. The other thing for me from the midfield today, and I wrote about this last week, is the decision making on shot selection has been quite poor amongst all three of the players. The core three: McGregor, Rogic, and Turnbull. And today that was not the case. I mean, if you look at the shot map from the game, it is a veritable orgy of central shots from inside the box, as opposed to, and I just looked at it while Alan was speaking there. We only had now again, some of this has to do with they were a little more open, so keep that in mind. But we had 12 shots blocked against Hearts. Some of them, and I documented a screenshot in my one thread last week where, Turnbull dribbles central and then tries to shoot through, 4 defenders and the keeper when there's, guys around him that he could pass off to. Today, we only had 5 block shots. And again, that's according to FOTMob. And that's not on a small number of shots. We had, I think you said 26, Enda?
26. And I'm just looking at the shot map here myself, 20 of them are from inside the box.
Yeah, and mostly central as well. I mean, that's the other thing. Yeah. I mean, they were kind of within the pipes. Most of them are the keeper box. So if we can add that kind of vertical passing with better decision making as far as when to shoot from the midfield, and if we get those reinforcements that everyone's talking about, hopefully within a month here, I mean, I think it's really. I think we again, we talked about this. We kind of lingered our way through about 8 weeks there with the injury to Rogic, and we kind of went back to the 18-19 vintage of Rodgers' kind of slower build-up play and more methodical. And today was just like right back into quote unquote Ange ball, and that McGregor in the 6. Throwing the vertical passing, the runs in behind, and better shot selection. I mean, that's how we could get a sustainable, huge uptick in output as far as chance creation, and make it, very difficult for teams to take points from us. We always talk about stretching that margin of XG difference and suppressing the opposition while, getting more high quality chances for us to reduce as many of those games where you say, how did we lose that game? Right. And, this is a kind of performance, and I think the composition of the performance is the most encouraging part of it.
I'm really just wasting time here until I can talk about Liam Scales for the next 20 odd minutes, but we'll move to the back 4, which was changed today. And I guess it's interesting for a number of reasons. Greg Taylor being number 1, coming back in at left back, Juranovic playing at right back for once. Where do we want to start? We'll start with Greg Taylor. We might as well. I mean, I know people aren't overly hot on Greg Taylor, but a needs must today with a couple of injuries out in the defense. So what did we make of Greg Taylor today, and do we think he will be taking over as a starter in the defense with Juranovic going to right back?
Yeah, interesting. He was thrown in given the injuries. Obviously, Montgomery's had, been the go-to person when there have been gaps there. And Taylor's been out for a long time. I think it was a pretty subdued performance. It was a fairly typical performance of someone who's just come back off a long injury, and that's no criticism. It's just we do see Taylor actually. He's a lot more creative, especially in games like that against sort of mediocre, middle of the table to lower SPFL teams. He's actually really effective, especially in the final third. So I didn't really notice him defensively, so that's probably a good thing. And in an attacking sense, I didn't notice a lot. Again, it was more a bit like I said with Johnson, where they created the right moments, they created the right field position, they created the right spaces. Just through making the right runs, through interconnecting, creating overloads, etc. That aspect of it, he contributed to, as did Johnson, which I think was more important than his individual output, which I suspect wasn't massive. I mean, Greg Taylor does do a good job in these type of games generally in terms of his expected assists. I suspect today was a bit quieter, and naturally so. I was pleased for Scales. I mean, I do like the look of him. It's very difficult to judge, right, on so little few minutes, right? But what I like about him immediately is his balance, the way he receives the ball, the way he looks forward. He's obviously quite physical, strong. He looks sort of lean and reasonably quick. And I think that athleticism is important as Celtic grow forward, because it's not always there. And it's a counterpoint to Taylor, actually. He's, bless him, he works his absolute heart out, but he just doesn't have that, pace and physicality that Scales looks like he's got. Looks very comfortable on the ball, Scales. What I don't know and haven't got the data for and seen much evidence about is, what his defensive organisation is like, what his positioning is like, how is he under stress, how is he when the opposition have got, overloads on that side, what's he doing when the ball's coming in from the other wing, etc., etc. All those important aspects of positioning and decision making. Defensively, we've just not seen any evidence of, but super pleased for him. Took his goal brilliantly. It was a great run, great diagonal run, great timing, nice shot to keep it down but with power. And as I say, a nice, tidy looking, composed footballer on first glance.
Yeah, he also put an unbelievable pass across the 6-yard box. Nobody got on the end of it. I think Kyogo just about missed it. It went to the back post. Pinball is getting in touch. He says that you guys must have been too busy looking at your calculators than watching the match. If you've never watched a game on your calculator, I'd highly recommend it. It's good quality. Anyway, Pinball obviously doesn't watch our show on a regular basis because that's what it's about. I want to talk about Liam Scales. I just want to say I'm delighted to see him actually, get an opportunity. You have to get the opportunities in these situations. If you're not, you are worried as a player when there's injuries and you're not the player that's taking on as a sub. So firstly, it was good to see that Ange was trusting enough of him to do that. Secondly, I completely agree with your idea of him, the way he receives the ball. His body's always open. It's never... too often you see, and it happens quite often with very left-sided or very right-sided fullbacks. It happens actually quite often with Luke Shaw. He gets the ball and his body's already turned on the inside, and immediately his first thing is to go back to the goalkeeper or go across to Harry Maguire because he physically just can't get his body turned, whereas Liam Scales was opening up his body, and obviously that comes with teams who aren't pressing you as much. Like Dundee United were, but I think he's going to grow into the position, and if he's not a starter, I think it's good that he's going to be selected in these opportunities, and if he can take them time and time again, he should eventually, hopefully, be at least a squad player within the Celtic team, because I don't think he is just yet. James, your general thoughts on the fullbacks? What does having a left-footed fullback do to the team? When it comes to the style of football Celtic want to play, just having Greg Taylor as a left-footed left back and Juranovic on the right, as opposed to two right-footed players.
Yeah, I just think the ability to get to the byline and cross. I mean, that's a huge part of it. I mean, above and beyond what you'd already mentioned as far as kind of, if they're opening up the body shape and getting the ball down the line to the wing. But that's what we saw with Juranovic when he was playing there, is he played deeper, almost like a midfielder. And very unusual if he was going to overlap with Jota and get the ball in. And we even talked about that, I think, last week on our show about some of the ugly attempts. He tried a couple finally with his left foot to cross, and not so good. So I think that's a big part of it. I think, as I said, maybe naive, but that Dundee United did not really come with a game plan that looked to replicate areas that other teams have targeted us. They didn't really play those long, high diagonal balls in behind our fullbacks. They started that a little bit in the second half, but oftentimes teams of their level, let's call it, as far as the wage bill disparity, that's where they've been targeting us. Particularly if you look at the profile of Juranovic and Taylor, neither of them are very good in the air. For obvious reasons. They also kind of lack that wide speed that teams that have given us trouble have been able to get in behind our fullbacks when they're inverted. So I thought it was a very comfortable performance for our fullbacks, but I also don't think that Dundee United did a lot to kind of push that. I think they made it easy to be comfortable and for our fullbacks, and with them trying to mostly play through the middle, I mean, that just was red meat for Starfelt with how he loves to dive in and keep the pressure on and win, and Carter Vickers as well. So, and that's why we were able to just dominate and keep the ball and the pressure. As for the most part, they weren't going long much, and using speed. And to think the largest part of that is because I don't think they really have much of that out wide.
So as we start to look forward, then Betis on Thursday night, Motherwell then on Sunday. I was supposed to be at that game, and my government had different ideas for that, so I'm unfortunately not able to go to that anymore. Ross County, and then on Wednesday, the following Wednesday, Hibs. Then on that Sunday, 3 days later, you're playing St. Mirren. Another 4 days later, you're playing St. Johnson. 3 days later, you're playing Hibs again, and then in January, you're playing Rangers. So it's as hectic a schedule. It always gets hectic at this stage of the season. Injuries galore in the Celtic squad so far. The real Betis game, it doesn't matter. Celtic are already out. It was, I'm sure it's been discussed on multiple shows across the day. What do Celtic do on Thursday night with the team? Do they go with a weakened side and try to preserve the likes of Kyogo and maybe even give James Forrest some more rest on the legs? Cal McGregor, give him a rest. David Turnbull, give him a rest. They don't have that many options to bring into the side, so you're not going to rest everybody. But if you were to pick out 3 to 4 names to give a break to, Alan, who would you be going for?
I don't think there's any upside to playing any of the regular players. So players that you've drilled a lot of minutes into, like McGregor, Turnbull, even Carter Vickers. I don't, and Kyogo. I don't see the upside of playing them at all. To me, I don't think Betis will be playing their strongest team. They're third. They're up to third in La Liga. Going great in that league. They will no doubt have another tough league game at the weekend after, and have already qualified. So there's no upside. I'm sure they'll be putting out a relatively weakened side, although their relatively weakened is quite another level to what I think we can put out. So for me, maybe because Starfelt's just back from a bit of a break, you keep him in, but you probably give Bain a game. You probably play Taylor again. If Forrest was only a precaution, you probably give him more minutes. But otherwise, let some of the players that are maybe wanting to be in the shop window, give your Soros and Ayetis a run. Say to them, look, you're not in the plans. Show somebody that you're good enough to get a move, for example. So yeah, no upside to playing the McGregors and the Turnbulls, etc.
Yeah, so Giacomakis start up front potentially. I'm struggling to think what the midfield 3 would be if they didn't go with Turnbull, Rogic, and McGregor. So you could start Beaton, you could start Sorrow, but I think you're going to have to start one off Cal McGregor, Turnbull, or Rogic, because I just don't think there's actually more than 4 midfielders at the club at the minute, is there? It's
a good point. I mean, a midfield of McCarthy, Sorrow, and Beaton would be interesting at
legs 11
sort of intellectual level, but I'm not sure any supporters would want to pay money to see that. But yeah, so it could be that you just, through lack of numbers, you have to essentially say to one of Turnbull and Rogic, right, one of you plays 60, one of you plays 30, and just accept that. Yeah, maybe.
Are you on the same state of mind here, James?
I think it's going to be interesting because so far it seems like doing what we're discussing would be against Ange's nature. Meaning that's certainly, I think, the pragmatic way to go. It's from a risk management perspective, given all the issues that we've had with injuries and relative to the squad depth, would be the prudent thing to do. I suspect that's what he'll do. But it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't, just because, it seems like, he's kind of like a general that doesn't want to give an inch in some ways. So, and that, certainly has its positives. So I suspect he will. I think he'll be pragmatic because it's so overwhelmingly obvious that you should probably from a reasonableness perspective. But like I said, it wouldn't completely surprise me if he, kind of goes it more in between just to try and put a more competitive team out. Because again, people talk about momentum, and I think it's about confidence. So if you had a midfield of, let's say Liam Shaw comes in. I mean, the guy hasn't had any minutes. Throw a Shaw in or Iragidi in, and let's say it just turns into a horrible game where we lose, we get clobbered at home. Is that really something that he's going to want to suffer through? And I don't know. I could see an argument both ways.
Yeah,
there is a psychological element to this, because you do have to take in team form and team momentum into as well. You can't just start the B team. I mean, I know the game is pointless, but even the B team losing has an effect on the first team. So I think
these guys have not been playing. So to throw a Shaw and Iragidi and whatever, as Alan said, whatever team Betis is going to field is going to be, reasonably good and levels above, let's say Shaw and Iragidi, for example. And, is it fair to those guys to throw them in and potentially have it be a real rough experience? So I suspect it'll be a mix. And so if I was, picking my poison, it would be the guys who we cannot afford to lose right now for the next 4 weeks. So it would be McGregor, no way, and Kyogo, no way. Pretty much other than that, okay, kind of pick your battles. But those are the two guys I think that absolutely have to be protected.
Yeah, I would. It's sort of funny how you characterize that, because when I looked at Postecoglou in Japan, he had no problem with making wholesale changes for midweek games in Japan. And that's why I think he'll do that. And actually, what you described about the general and the pride, and all those things that you talked about there made me think of Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers, to me, would put the maintenance of a good run and momentum of feel-good factor of winning and him looking good over the welfare of the players, quite frankly, where I don't think Postecoglou will. I think Postecoglou would expect to motivate the likes of Ayeti, Soro, McCarthy, whoever, to really genuinely believe they can go out against Betis and get a result. Now, I'm not suggesting we go as far down the depth as playing Shaw and Iragidi. I wasn't saying that, because I don't think those are first team ready players.
Right.
But I do think we need to take the key players out the firing line as a minimum. But I think it still can be a reasonably strong side, because, as I say, Taylor, Forrest, probably Starfelt need minutes. So there's three that you could argue would start anyway. Abada hasn't played much. I mean, it would be great to see him maybe play as a striker, for example. So I think there's going to be players who've featured and will feature. Maybe Montgomery will get a full 90 minutes. And as I say, McCarthy, Bitton, if you had them in midfield, you'd like to think we wouldn't get a hammering. At least we could control the game to some degree as well. So yeah, no, I'm not saying playing the likes of Shaw. No, but I think Postecoglou will go with what is the best for the club in the long run.
Yeah, it should be a good opportunity to play Liam Scales as well in left back.
And Liam Scales, of course. He was first name in my mental team sheet. And of
exactly. No, but I think the defense, out of all the positions, I think I'd be changing up the defense as the last resort, because if you think about the positions that you need continuity in, it is the centre back positions and possibly the fullbacks as well. So, I mean, yes, you might be able to make a couple of changes at the fullbacks, but I think the centre back positions is probably unchanged for the Betis game on Thursday. But yeah, we shall wait and see.
Well, we need to be careful here, Enda, because from what has been said during the week, it doesn't look like Julian's going to be back anytime soon. It looks like his injury is way more serious than people perhaps feared, and so. We're really exposed again. We're really exposed in central defence as well as central midfield now.
Yeah, we'll see on Thursday, and we'll make sure to cover it. This is the Huddle Breakdown. We're delighted to be join the Acsom Charity Weekender. The donation link is in the description below. Keep your comments coming in. We'll try to get to a couple before we finish up. If you want to follow us, you can get us at Huddle Breakdown on Twitter. You can subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast as well. Just to finish up, then, the rumor mill was flying during the week, guys, of potential January transfers, and the Japanese news industry are saying that Celtic are about to complete a triple signing. It was originally, rumored that it might be one or two, but a triple signing seems to be on the cards for Celtic. Maeda seems to be more or less done. Rio Hatate is essentially done as well, and then Edaguchi, I think is how you pronounce his name, is the third one as well. So, Jim, did you do much digging into these guys? What are they going to bring? What type of players they are? And potentially, where are they going to play? Like, who are they coming in to strengthen?
Yeah, I think I have not looked at Itaguchi yet. I'll go off of your enunciation or pronunciation there. So it's your fail if that's wrong, not mine. You're the professional, so I'm relying on you.
Quote unquote.
So the first two I have looked at, I think, and we talked about this when Ange first joined, which is the kind of interchangeability of his side and players that can kind of move across different positions. So Hatate certainly fits that bill. He's played all over. I suspect he's going to be coming in for midfield, given the severity of the needs that we have there relative to some depth. He seems to be adept at the kind of one-touch, quick passing, and again, as we've seen with McGregor in that 6 role, the ability to have that. I mean, increase that depth to be able to rotate out and stop flogging Turnbull every single game, and have some quality depth there, I think would be hugely important. You can fill in at left back, that kind of thing as well, if need be. Would you rather have him there instead of Juranovic? Who knows? I mean, but at least that's the thing. You have the robustness. We always talk about systems and having a robust kind of, thinking of the squad as a system, and having those players, quality players that can fill in at a quality level in multiple positions, kind of increases your robustness. So I think he's going to go a long way with that. And I think Maeda, again, across the front three, give us a little more depth at striker, so that, again, we're not flogging Kyogo, and you have somebody that has a comparable playing style, which we do not have right now, outside of, Alan and I, particularly Alan, I think, has smartly speculated that Abada could probably maybe play that kind of role, but we haven't seen that yet. So, when we go to another striker, it's really a different animal as far as style of play. So he would provide that, but also I think, and I've talked about this a lot, which is the one, we started that vertical passing from deep over the top. That's, kind of a harbinger of Ange ball. The other thing that we haven't quite deployed yet is the aggressive pressing at an elite level. And that's been a personnel issue that we've talked about a lot on the show. And I think Maeda and Hatate, but particularly Maeda in the front three, would be another one like Kyogo, who's, at an elite level as far as pressing intensity, aggressiveness, and ability. So right now, Kyogo's kind of on an island in that sense in the front three. Abada's better than the other two as far as Jota or Force, but not at that level of Kyogo. Maeda would bring that. So if you could mix him in either on the left or the right with Kyogo at times, that would be quite the pressing force. Bring Maeda and or Hatate into that midfield as well. His pressing is also kind of at that elite level relative to a Turnbull or Rogic, who have both put forth good effort in that regard, but it's probably just not their natural, given their physicality, their natural strength. So I think that's kind of the next wave that we're going to see coming out of January's window, is that piece of the Ange ball puzzle that hopefully will kind of get stepped up to the next level.
Mm-hmm. The Itaguchi, or however you pronounce his name, from what I've read, we are getting a lesser version of the player that he was a few years ago. Apparently he was absolutely phenomenal from around 2017 to early 2020, and then sort of drifted off, and not really sure what kind of player he is just yet. But I mean, these players are coming in, they're going to be ready to play. They might be even a little bit tired, if anything, having played in the J League all year. Alan, what do you think? What kind of impact will this have on the team? Is it really just about depth more than anything at this stage to kick on after Christmas, or do you see these guys as signings that might actually take Celtic to a higher level?
Yeah, I think it may well be about depth. I mean, one of the beauties of what's happened since Postecoglou has arrived is that some of us we've all made new friends with Japanese football journalists and new people on Twitter to follow and new people to ask questions of. It's been great, and some lovely interactions on that, trying to find out about these players, and also I think people in the Asian, Australian, Japanese football communities, journalists, commentators, etc., are really keen to engage and to tell you about these players because they want to promote that game and they want to show their football in the best light. I think we also need to. So it's quite. We've got a few little snippets on those players, but I think we have to also think about the development life cycle of a Japanese footballer is very different to what we're used to. Okay, so a very typical, which I think all of these players have been through, would be, the education and tertiary education especially is incredibly important. So what I mean is that these guys will have gone through university over and above a professional football career. So even though they've then gone from university to the professional ranks, I'm sure will have been playing to some decent level whilst they're being educated. That education would have been their primary goal in their sort of late teen 20 years. So you don't get necessarily a 17-year-old player, and suddenly at 22 he's played for 5 years. So somebody like Ideguchi is an interesting one again because he broke through. He got into the Japan national team, played 15 times for Japan. He just didn't make the 2018. He was cut, the last man cut from their World Cup squad.
I heard that was something to do with the loan move or his move to Leeds. I'm not sure how.
Yeah, so again, big story for a Japanese player to get an EPL move, right? So that, again, especially so young, because again, you might have thought, well, he was 22, I think, at the time, but he would only have been playing pro in Japan full time for at most a couple of years at that point. So it's a big move for him, and it didn't work out. And then he had a couple of loan deals, one of which he picked up a very serious injury, which put him out of the game for quite a while. And now he's back in Japan. Now that happens to a lot of players. Now, what is he? And I think the mood and the sentiment that I've got from reading people who are experts on this in Japan is that, I think one of the comments was I could close my eyes, throw a dart at a list of central midfielders in Japan and come up with a better one than him, which was pretty brutal. But nevertheless, listen, it's these people watch the games in Japan a lot more than we do, obviously. So that doesn't sound very encouraging. But on the other hand, there's in Ange we trust. If he knows the player, seen the player, knows what he can do, and it sounds like he's a player that has ability and has great ability, and maybe has lost his way in the game. But for £1 million, what appears to be the fee, how much of a risk is that? Think of the money that we've spent on the players that Ange has already decided, are surplus. So your Barkas, Bolingoli, Soro, Ayeti, these players have all come in for multi-million-pound deals. So if Ange can get Maeda, Hatate, whose contract is nearly up, Hatate, whose contract is up in the summer, and this Ideguchi, who looks like it'll only cost about $1 million, you're looking at under $3 million potentially for these three players, and they're players that he knows and thinks will fit in structurally into the system that he wants to play. So I think if that's what he wants, and I think it will generally bolster the squad. And my God, with Ideguchi and Hatate, that central midfield position and that athleticism and pace in the middle is exactly what we need. And we absolutely need cover for Kyogo. So I think they're all very sensible. If additionally the rumours about Hannes Wolf are true, which I'm chuckling because I just I'm refusing to believe it. But that would be a case of moving the team up to a higher level if that's the kind of standard of player that we can get hold of.
I'd be very skeptical, first of all, whether that's true or not. Secondly, I'd also be skeptical if they're willing to sell him to Celtic, because why are they willing to sell him to Celtic? There must be a reason. If he is within Celtic's price range, I can't see why he would be. The question I wanted to ask of you, James, is these three signings, what do you think it means for the overall structure at Celtic? Because on the one hand, you've got, the idea that Celtic were supposed to be moving into a director of football model, whereas clearly this is an Ange move, that he knows these players, he wants these players. But on the other hand, it also is having Ange in here knowing the J League, knowing different markets, that's a market that other clubs won't be able to get into as easily as Celtic are able to now. So, I mean, overall, it's sort of striking a weird balance. It has good reasons behind it, and it has bad reasons behind it.
Yeah, I think it's playing the hand that's dealt with cards that aren't great in a very good way, right? So one of the things I write about and track, so I'm actually a trained analyst, a financial analyst in my background. So, I can rip apart balance sheets and income statements and all that stuff and build pro forma into the future. So I think there's, I've been very, very critical of the board and some of the strategic decisions that the club have made. But one criticism that I think is relatively unfair, and it's very rare that I defend decision making from Celtic leadership, is that there's some kitty of money because there's 17 million shown on the last financial statement in the public, and we sold those players over the summer. Therefore, they're being cheap for not spending money in the January window, given the fact that we've got all of this on, this huge prize at the end of the season. So it's to speculate, to accumulate, all these things that you hear. The reality is, if you rip apart the financials, is they're basically running the club to be around break even this season. That the money that came in for Edouard is basically going to get the club to about break even. So I've been talking about this for months now, is that there's not going to be a big kitty in January unless we sell someone else. If we're able to get rid of some of the players that aren't playing at some kind of amount of money, or they decide to be more aggressive and, truly speculate to accumulate, maybe tap into the line of credit or do something that's completely out of character, that the way they've run things in the past. So when you think about that within that context, maybe that midfielder isn't the best option in Japan, but he's a good option relative to the cost that he's going to. So if you think about, again, being the dork that I am, think about it as an optimization. We have severe depth requirements. We have multiple areas that we have to upgrade our depth. Well, how do you do that on a limited budget? Well, you target players that aren't going to cost a lot. And that's Japan by definition, because the league is kind of still on the cheap end relative to quality. We've seen that with Kyogo. And I think that's the reputation kind of globally, is it's still a place that you can get value. And then you're getting players that are at the end of their contracts or winding those contracts down. So the level of quality that you can get for the amount of outlay that you're going to have financially, given the fact that money is tight, I think it's actually looks like it's going to be a really smart way to go, given all of this kind of factors. So I don't think it's going to be an issue of the board being cheap or anything like that. It's going to be, there's not a lot of money to stretch. And so we're trying to do the best we can with limited resources.
And the timing, James, as well. I mean,
right.
One of the things that Postecoglou seems very adamant about is that this has to happen at the beginning of January, at the start of January, so that when they go for that winter camp, it's 2 weeks of Ange and his magic on the training pitch, right? And those players are good to go come the middle of January for that.
That's a great point, Alan. Great point.
And that actually could be. I wouldn't want to put an expected points value on that, but I think that would be a huge advantage. To rather than footering about at the end of January and hoping to get some EPL cast off. Yeah,
for sure. I think you are getting more value out of a market where people don't really know much about it. To be fair, that's a fairly obvious point, but everyone wants somebody who's played in England. Not many people are looking in Japan. So if Celtic could be breaking the Asian market in the same way that a lot of clubs have tried to do in the past, by simply having a manager who has experience dealing in it. So, I mean, it makes all the difference. So just before I finish up then, the next couple of weeks are obviously very important for Celtic. What are your general thoughts going into the next 5 or 6 games before January, before those players come in? Are you confident, quietly confident, nervous? What's the general feeling amongst the Huddle Breakdown crew?
Age before beauty, Alan.
So I was just thinking, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud, that obviously the December run, or if you think about even the end of November when we played Aberdeen and then Hearts, Dundee United away, the fact that the Real Betis game has become effectively an empty fixture, really, no pressure in a sense. Then you're looking at a run of Motherwell and Ross County leading up to the cup final, and then leading up to the derby in beginning of January. You've actually got St Mirren, St Johnstone, and Hibs. So I don't think that's the worst, right? I think we've almost had the worst of it a little bit. I'm sure I'll live to regret saying that. But just looking at it and thinking analytically, I would say it's not as bad as it could be. So what gives me hope for the rest of the season is if you look at the underlying performance metrics, and and James and I constantly in every show talk about variance, positive and negative, is that Celtic continue to be at the wrong end of negative variance. If you think about all of the things, think about the three main things that can impact a game of football from a variance perspective. You think about, expected goals is a great one. Are you scoring as many goals as the chances you create suggest you would? No, we are not. We've got a huge amount more we can do. There's more goals in the Celtic team. Okay, we're conceding around about the rate that we should, and we're not conceding many, but we're not scoring the goals that we should, and there's a lot more to come from the Celtic team. Okay, so that's negative variance at the moment. We're continuing to have an awful lot of injuries. Now, Celtic fans crying about injuries. For God's sake, we've got the biggest squad, but as we know, the squad's going through an enormous transition, and therefore there's a lot of players who are not, aren't part of Postecoglou's plans, and there's a lot of players that have left that have not been replaced yet. So injuries will have an impact, especially when you're trying to integrate so many new players. And again, we continue to be on the end of that. And then, because it's topical and everyone else is talking about it, decisions on the part, that variance in terms of, we're on the negative side of that as well, despite the Kyogo goal. We're still on the negative side of that. So what I'm saying is that the underlying performance metrics for Celtic are really encouraging. And if you look at models that model the performances that have happened up till now, so doing Monte Carlo simulations of, if you feed all those performances into a model, where would you, if you ran 10,000 simulations, Celtic be? Celtic would actually be kind of top. And then if you look at projection models that take what are the underlying performance data that is being produced by all the teams, and you project that forward, Celtic would be top of that league as well. So because of the negative variance, because of the underlying performance metrics, I'm hugely positive. And we may not win the league, but the direction is absolutely the right direction.
Last word to you, James.
Yeah, I think the fixture list is very positive, and definitely on a relative basis, relative to what Rangers have to do between now and January 2nd. We kind of took the brunt of the more difficult first round of fixtures, and that kind of flipped during the second round. The big thing for me is injuries. The amount of games, the thinness of the squad, the existing injuries. Forrest is going to be out. This is the thing with these soft tissue injuries. As soon as a guy pulls out, like we saw with Jota, the talk was, it's not going to be that bad. You don't know with soft tissues injury types. So now he's all of a sudden that's 4 weeks, right? So anytime these guys do a hamstring or something like that, the injury recurrence risk, like we saw now with potentially Forrest, right? So these things are kind of feeding back on themselves. And that's been something I've been harping on for 3 months now, is that when these things go wrong, they can cluster because of kind of the interconnectedness of guys playing too much. So I'm confident as long as we can kind of squeak through this and not have any more significant injuries for any length of time. And that's a big if, right? I think there's a significant risk that we could have more of these kinds of injuries just because of what these guys are having to do, the way that we play, and the number of games that we have now in the next 4 weeks. It's a pretty big ask for these guys to be able to get through it. So I think reasonably there could be more, and that's the concern, because the depth just isn't there.
Well, we shall see. Hopefully, the good form continues with Celtic coming up on Thursday against Real Betis. We are the Huddle Breakdown. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can get us at Huddle Breakdown, or you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. This is the Acsom Charity Weekender. There's a really good cause. St. Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic. Most of the money will be going to St. Vincent de Paul, who are providing meals for children in need. So it's well worth donating any money you can get.
Have we hit 20,000
into it.
yet? We're getting near to 20,000.
I think we were near enough. We were on the 19K, so I'm not sure
Okay,
whereabouts
fantastic.
we are at the minute. But the link is in the description below if you want to donate, and it's well worth giving some money if you can spare it. The Celtic women's team are just kicking off. They're now against Glasgow City in a derby. It's
game.
on BBC
Huge
Alba
game.
if you want to
Huge
watch
game,
that
yeah.
game. So well worth getting into that game and giving a view as well. So continue on with the Charity Weekender here on Acsom, and we will chat to you next week on the Huddle Breakdown. Thanks for watching.